3 days after the incident at City National Bank, Margaret Henderson woke up to find her phone ringing. It was her grandson, Tommy, calling from Portland at 7 in the morning, which was unusual. "Grandma, are you okay? Why didn't you tell me what happened at the bank?" Margaret sat up in bed, confused. "What are you talking about? How do you even know about that?" "It's all over social media. Someone posted a video."
"Grandma, Keanu Reeves stood up for you?"
Margaret's heart sank. She'd hoped the whole thing would just fade away quietly. "Oh no, is it bad? Am I all over the internet?" "Bad, Grandma, no. People are calling you a hero." "Well, they're calling Keanu a hero, but you're in it too. Hold on, I'm sending you the link." Margaret didn't really understand social media, but Tommy walked her through how to watch the video on her old smartphone. There she was, in grainy phone footage, standing at the bank counter while Keanu spoke to the manager. The person filming had been several people back in line, so the audio wasn't perfect, but you could hear most of what was said. The video had millions of views. The comments were overwhelming. People were sharing their own stories about elderly parents and grandparents being mistreated. Others were praising Keanu for using his platform to stand up for someone. Some were angry at the bank. A few were sharing Margaret's story like she was some kind of symbol. "I don't want to be famous," Margaret told Tommy. "I just wanted to deposit my check." "I know, Grandma, but maybe something good can come from this. People are talking about how we treat elderly people. That's important." After she hung up with Tommy, her daughter Lisa called. Then her neighbor called. Then people she hadn't heard from in years started reaching out. Everyone wanted to know if she was okay, if the story was true, if Keanu was really as nice as he seemed in the video. Margaret felt exhausted by all the attention. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. A strange sense that maybe her humiliation had served a purpose. If her bad experience could help prevent someone else from feeling the way she'd felt that day, maybe it was worth it. On Thursday, Margaret returned to City National Bank as Mr. Peterson had requested. She was nervous, half expecting the whole thing to have been forgotten now that the cameras were gone. But when she walked through the doors, everything was different. Mr. Peterson was waiting for her personally. He escorted her past the regular line to a quiet desk in the corner marked Senior Services. A woman named Patricia, probably in her 50s with kind eyes and a patient smile, greeted Margaret warmly. "Mrs. Henderson, it's wonderful to meet you. Mr. Peterson has told me all about you. I'm here to help you set up direct deposit and answer any questions you might have about our Senior Services program." Patricia spent 45 minutes with Margaret, never once making her feel rushed or stupid for asking questions. She explained everything in simple terms, showed Margaret how to use the ATM if she wanted to, and gave her a direct phone number she could call if she ever needed help. This service was always available, Patricia explained gently, but we weren't doing a good job of making sure people knew about it. That's changing now. Mr. Peterson stopped by near the end to check on them. He looked nervous, which Margaret found oddly satisfying. "Mrs. Henderson, I wanted you to know that we've implemented new training for all our staff. Everyone is being retrained on customer service with a special focus on treating elderly clients with dignity. We've also changed our protocol for flagged accounts. Now we call customers first before assuming anything." "That's good," Margaret said. "It shouldn't have taken a celebrity shaming you to make those changes, but I'm glad you're making them." Mr. Peterson had the grace to look ashamed. "You're absolutely right. I'm sorry it took that for us to see what we were doing wrong." As Margaret was leaving, Ashley, the young teller, approached her hesitantly. "Mrs. Henderson, could I talk to you for just a moment?" Margaret nodded and they stepped aside. "I've thought about what happened every day since Tuesday," Ashley said. Her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd been crying recently. "I talked to my grandmother about it. She told me about times people made her feel invisible or incompetent just because she's older. I never realized I was doing that to people." "And now?" Margaret asked. "Now I see things differently. Yesterday, an older gentleman came in who was confused about his statement. The old me would have been impatient. Instead, I took my time. I explained everything clearly. I offered him a chair. And you know what? It didn't take that much longer, and he left happy. It's not hard to be kind." Margaret felt something loosen in her chest. "That's all I wanted. For people to learn from this," Ashley nodded. "Thank you for not hating me. I would understand if you did." "I don't hate you," Margaret said. "I just hope you remember this feeling the next time someone needs a little extra patience." The story didn't end there. Over the following weeks, Margaret noticed changes everywhere she went. At the grocery store where she worked nights, the manager implemented new policies about seating for older employees. The pharmacy where she got her medications started offering a delivery service for elderly customers who had trouble getting around. Local news stations picked up the story, not just focusing on the celebrity aspect, but on the larger issue of how society treats its elderly citizens. Senior advocacy groups started using the video as a teaching tool. City National Bank became something of a model, with other banks reaching out to learn about their new senior services program. Margaret received hundreds of letters. People sent them to the bank, which forwarded them to her. Some were from other elderly people sharing their own stories. Some were from young people who said the video made them think about how they treated their own grandparents. A few were from bank employees at other branches who had been inspired to change their approach. One letter in particular made Margaret cry. It was from a woman whose mother had dementia and who struggled every time she had to help her with banking. She wrote that watching Keanu stand up for Margaret had given her hope that the world could still be kind to people who were vulnerable. Keanu himself checked in on Margaret twice. The first time was a phone call from his assistant, making sure she'd gotten the direct deposit set up and asking if she needed anything else. The second was a handwritten note that arrived 3 weeks after the incident. "Dear Margaret," it read, "I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to thank you for letting me help you that day. My mother would have been proud to know that her lessons about kindness are still guiding me. You reminded me why those lessons matter. I hope the bank is treating you better now. If not, you have my number. Take care of yourself. You matter more than you know. With respect, Keanu." Margaret put the letter in a frame and hung it in her living room. Not because it was from someone famous, but because it was a reminder that she did matter, that her dignity was worth fighting for, that being old didn't mean being invisible. The money Keanu had given her she used carefully. 3 months of medication, just as he'd intended. It gave her breathing room she hadn't had in years. She was able to cut back on her night shifts, which meant more sleep and less pain in her knees. Small changes, but they made a big difference. Tommy and Lisa visited for Thanksgiving that year. They'd made more of an effort to stay in touch since the incident, calling twice a week instead of once, checking in more often. Margaret suspected they felt guilty for not realizing how much she'd been struggling, but she didn't blame them. Everyone was busy. Everyone had their own lives. Over Thanksgiving dinner, Tommy brought up the video again. "Has it died down yet? Are people still recognizing you?" Margaret laughed. "Honey, nobody recognized me to begin with. I was just an old lady in the background. But yes, things are quieter now. Do you ever regret what happened? All that attention and publicity?" Margaret thought about it while she carved the turkey. "No," she said finally. "It was awful when it was happening. Being humiliated like that, having everyone stare at me. But what came after? The changes at the bank, the letters from people who said it helped them, knowing that maybe some other elderly person won't be treated that way because of what happened to me, that makes it worth it." "Keanu Reeves is still the coolest person ever," Tommy said, shaking his head, the way he just stepped in like that. "He is pretty cool," Margaret agreed. "But you know what I learned? It doesn't take being famous to stand up for someone. That woman in line, the one who apologized for being impatient, she was just a regular person. Robert, the teller who admitted he should have noticed me struggling. Regular person, anyone could have done what Keanu did. They just needed to care enough to try." Lisa reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm sorry we didn't know how hard things were for you. The medication costs, working nights at your age. You should have told us." "I didn't want to be a burden," Margaret said quietly. "You're not a burden. You're our mother. You're allowed to need help." That was the real lesson, Margaret realized. Not just that people should treat the elderly better, but that asking for help wasn't weakness. That needing support didn't make you less valuable. That vulnerability was part of being human regardless of age. 6 months after the incident, Margaret received an invitation to speak at a senior advocacy conference. They wanted her to share her story, to talk about dignity and respect in aging. She almost said no. Public speaking terrified her, and she still didn't think of herself as anyone special. But then she thought about all those letters, all those people who said her story had helped them. She thought about Keanu's note, telling her she mattered more than she knew. She thought about Ashley learning to be more patient, about the changes at the bank, about the ripples that one moment had created. She said yes. Standing in front of 200 people at that conference was one of the hardest things Margaret had ever done. Her hands shook and her voice wavered at first. But as she told her story, as she watched people nodding in recognition and understanding, something shifted inside her. She wasn't just an old woman who'd been embarrassed at a bank. She was someone whose experience had meaning, someone whose voice mattered, someone who could help create change just by being willing to share her truth. The thing about getting older, she told the audience near the end of her speech, is that society starts treating you like you're fading away, like you're less than you used to be. But I'm still here. I still have thoughts and feelings and dignity that deserve respect. We all do, and we shouldn't need a celebrity to remind people of that basic truth. The standing ovation surprised her. These were her peers, people who understood exactly what she'd been through because they'd experienced it themselves. They weren't applauding her. They were applauding the message. They were standing up for their own dignity too. Margaret Henderson never became truly famous. The video faded from social media's attention span, replaced by newer stories and newer viral moments. But the changes that day created lasted. City National Bank's new policies spread to other branches. Other banks took notice. Small shifts happened across the industry. More importantly, individual people changed. Ashley never forgot the lesson she'd learned. Robert started paying more attention to customers who seemed to be struggling. The woman who'd apologized for being impatient started volunteering at a senior center, tiny ripples spreading outward from one moment of kindness. And Margaret? She kept living her life. She eventually quit the night shifts at the grocery store because her medications were more affordable now, and because her kids insisted on helping her financially. She made new friends at the senior center. She even started dating a widower she met at the pharmacy, both of them bonding over the absurdity of medication costs. She never forgot what Keanu had done for her that day. But more than that, she never forgot what she'd learned about herself. That her dignity mattered, that her voice had power, that being old didn't mean being invisible. The last thing Margaret did before bed each night was look at that framed letter on her living room wall. Not to admire the signature of someone famous, but to remind herself of the truth it contained. She mattered. She always had. And she always would. Margaret stood there with the money in her hand looking at Keanu like he'd just handed her the world instead of a few $100s. Her lips trembled as she tried to find words that wouldn't come. Around them, the bank had transformed into something that felt more like a community gathering than a financial institution. People weren't in a hurry anymore. They were witnessing something rare and real. "I don't know what to say," Margaret finally managed. "Nobody's ever done anything like this for me." "You don't need to say anything," Keanu replied. His voice was warm, the kind of warmth that comes from genuine caring rather than performance. "Just promise me something. If you ever come back to this bank and they treat you with anything less than respect, you call someone. You have people who care about you, right? Your grandchildren?" Margaret nodded. "Tommy and Lisa. They live in Portland, but they call every week." "Then you tell them. Don't just accept poor treatment because you think that's how things are supposed to be. You matter, Margaret. Your comfort matters. Your dignity matters." Someone in the crowd started clapping. Then another person joined in. Within seconds, the entire bank was applauding. Not for Keanu, though he was certainly part of it, but for what was happening. For the reminder that kindness still existed in a world that often felt too rushed and impersonal. Ashley, the young teller, was openly crying now. She came around from behind the counter, something employees almost never did. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm so sorry. I have a grandmother who's about your age, and if someone treated her the way I treated you, I'd be furious. I don't know what I was thinking." Margaret looked at the young woman, and something in her expression softened. Despite everything that had happened, she wasn't the type to hold grudges. "You're young," she said quietly. "You'll learn. I just hope you remember this next time." "I will," Ashley promised. "I swear I will." Mr. Peterson had pulled out his phone and was frantically typing. Keanu watched him for a moment. "What are you doing?" "Emailing the regional director," Mr. Peterson said without looking up. "And scheduling an emergency staff meeting for tomorrow morning." "This can't happen again." "Not at my branch." "Good," Keanu said. But he wasn't quite satisfied yet. There was something else bothering him. Something he'd noticed during the whole ordeal. "Can I ask you something else?" When Mrs. Henderson first came to the counter, How many employees saw her standing there for an hour before she reached the front of the line? Mr. Peterson looked up from his phone, confused by the question. I'm not sure I understand. There are 4 teller windows. 3 of them were open. That means 3 employees watched an elderly woman stand in line for an hour. None of them thought to open another window to move the line faster. None of them considered that maybe someone her age shouldn't be standing that long. The question hung in the air. Around the bank, other employees had gone very quiet. A teller at window 2, an older man named Robert, according to his name tag, spoke up. You're right, Robert said. I saw her. I should have said something. I should have offered her a chair or asked if she needed help. I just kept processing my own customers and didn't think about it. His honesty broke something open. Another teller, a young man at window 4, nodded. Same here. I noticed she'd been waiting a long time, but I figured she'd get to the front eventually. I didn't think about how hard it must be to stand for that long. Keanu looked at each of them, not with anger, but with the kind of steady gaze that made people examine themselves. This is what I mean about culture. It's not just about one teller having a bad day or one manager following protocol too rigidly. It's about an entire system that's forgotten these are people, not just account numbers. He turned back to Margaret. Do you have to come to the bank every month to deposit your check? Yes, she said. They mail it to me and I bring it in. Do they offer direct deposit? Margaret looked uncertain. I don't know. I've always done it this way. Keanu looked at Mr. Peterson with raised eyebrows. The manager jumped into action. Mrs. Henderson, we absolutely offer direct deposit. I can set that up for you right now if you'd like. Your pension would go directly into your account every month. You'd never have to wait in line again unless you wanted to. But I don't understand computers very well, Margaret said hesitantly. You don't need to, Mr. Peterson assured her. We can handle all the paperwork. You just need to sign a form, and we'd coordinate with whoever issues your pension. It's completely free and it would save you a trip every month. Margaret looked overwhelmed. Would I still be able to withdraw cash when I need it? Of course. You could use the ATM, or if you prefer, you could still come inside and we'd help you. No waiting in line necessary. We have a special services desk for customers who need extra assistance. You have a special services desk? Margaret asked. I didn't know that. An uncomfortable silence followed. Robert, the honest teller, cleared his throat. We're supposed to direct customers to it when they need help, but honestly, we don't always remember to mention it. That's going to change. Keanu pulled a business card from his wallet, not his personal card, but one for his assistant. He handed it to Margaret. This is my assistant's number. If you ever have trouble here or anywhere else, if anyone treats you poorly or you need help with something, you can call this number. Someone will get back to you within a day. Margaret took the card with shaking hands. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me. Because you deserve kindness, Keanu said simply, and because my mother taught me that how we treat people when they're vulnerable says everything about our character. She would have liked you. The way he said it, the slight past tense, told Margaret that his mother was no longer alive. She reached out and touched his arm. She raised a good son. Something flickered across Keanu's face, a mix of grief and gratitude. I try to honor what she taught me. A woman from the line stepped forward. She was middle-aged, well-dressed, and had been one of the people sighing impatiently earlier. I want to apologize too, she said, looking at Margaret. I was annoyed about the wait. I actually huffed and checked my watch. I'm ashamed of myself. My own mother is in a nursing home, and I'd be devastated if someone treated her the way we all stood by and let you be treated. Her confession opened the floodgates. Other people came forward, not all of them, but enough. They apologized for their impatience, for not speaking up, for being more concerned about their schedules than about a fellow human being who was struggling. Margaret didn't know how to handle all the attention. She'd gone from being invisible to being the center of something much bigger than herself. Keanu sensed her discomfort. Hey, he said softly, drawing her attention back to him. Want to get out of here? I think your business is done, and this is getting to be a lot. Yes. Please, she said gratefully. Keanu took her elbow gently and started guiding her toward the door. Mr. Peterson called after them. Mrs. Henderson, please come back on Thursday. I'll have the direct deposit forms ready, and we'll get you set up with our senior services program. No appointment necessary. Just come in and ask for me directly. Margaret nodded without turning around. She just wanted to leave, to process everything that had happened in the quiet of her own apartment. Outside the bank, The afternoon sun was bright and warm. The city noise rushed back in, cars honking, people talking, the normal chaos of urban life. It felt jarring after the intensity of what had just happened inside. Margaret stopped on the sidewalk, still holding Keanu's arm. "I need to sit down for a minute. There's a bench over there." They walked to a nearby bench and Margaret sat down heavily. She was still clutching her purse, the money he'd given her tucked safely inside along with her bank withdrawal. She looked at Keanu as he sat beside her. "Why did you really do all that?" she asked. "And please don't just say it's because I deserve kindness. There's more to it than that." Keanu was quiet for a moment, watching the people pass by on the sidewalk. "My mother had Parkinson's disease," he said finally. Toward the end, she needed help with everything. I saw how people treated her when she couldn't move fast enough or when her hands shook too much to sign a receipt. Most people were patient, but some weren't. Some people acted like she was an inconvenience, like she should just hurry up and get out of their way. He turned to look at Margaret. "I couldn't help my mother every time she needed it. I was working, traveling, and I couldn't be there for every grocery store trip or bank visit. So now when I see someone in that situation, someone who reminds me of her, I step in. Because I wish more people had stepped in for her." Margaret's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different. These weren't tears of humiliation or fear. These were tears of understanding and shared grief. "I'm sorry you lost your mother," she said. "I'm sorry anyone has to deal with what you dealt with in—" "There," he replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the world go by. Finally, Margaret spoke again. "You know what the worst part was? It wasn't even the way that girl spoke to me or how the manager questioned me. It was the feeling that I didn't matter, that I was just in everyone's way, that being old meant I couldn't be trusted to handle my own affairs anymore." "You do matter," Keanu said firmly. "You worked night shifts at 78 to afford your medicine. You raised a family. You've lived through things these young people can't even imagine. Your experience, your wisdom, your very existence matters. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Margaret smiled, a real smile this time. "You're quite something, Mr. Reeves." "Just Keanu," he said. "And you're quite something yourself, Margaret." The transformation in the bank was immediate and almost surreal. 30 seconds ago, Margaret Henderson had been an invisible old woman holding up the line. Now, with Keanu Reeves standing beside her chair speaking on her behalf, she might as well have been the most important person in the building. Mr. Peterson was stammering now. "Mr. Reeves, I can assure you that we only have our customers' best interests at heart. We were simply following standard security protocols." Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just looked at the manager with those steady eyes that had captivated audiences for decades, and somehow that quiet gaze held more power than any amount of yelling could have. "Standard protocols," Keanu repeated slowly. "Is it standard protocol to interrogate a 78-year-old woman in the middle of your lobby? Is it standard protocol to make assumptions about someone's mental capacity based on their age? Is it standard protocol to refuse basic courtesy like offering a chair to someone who's been standing for an hour?" Each question landed like a stone dropping into still water, the ripples spreading through the gathered crowd. People who had been annoyed at the delay 15 minutes ago were now filming on their phones, not to mock Margaret, but to capture this moment of someone standing up for basic human decency. Ashley, the teller, had tears streaming down her face now. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to be rude. I was just following the guidelines we were given about suspicious activity." Keanu turned to her and his expression softened slightly. "I understand you're doing your job, but guidelines are meant to protect people, not humiliate them. There's a way to ask questions with respect. There's a way to treat every customer like they matter, regardless of their age or how much money they have in their account." He glanced back at Margaret, who was sitting in the chair looking overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Her tears had stopped, but her hands still gripped her purse tightly. Keanu could see she was uncomfortable being the center of this scene, even though she was no longer the target of it. "Let's start over," Keanu said, turning back to Mr. Peterson. "Mrs. Henderson came here to deposit her pension check and withdraw some cash for her medications. Can someone please help her do that?" "Of course," Mr. Peterson said quickly. "Absolutely. Ashley, please process Mrs. Henderson's transaction immediately." "Wait," Keanu said, holding up a hand. "Before you do that, I want to understand something. What exactly flagged her account as suspicious? Can you explain it to me like I'm a customer who might have the same issue?" Mr. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. He looked at the paper in his hands, the one with Margaret's account information. There were 3 deposits this month instead of the usual one. The system flags accounts when there's unusual activity. And when the system flags an account, what's the next step? We review the transactions and determine if there's potential fraud. Did you review Mrs. Henderson's transactions? Well, yes, that's what we were doing when... So you saw that 2 of the deposits were personal checks for small amounts? $50 and $75, according to what Mrs. Henderson mentioned? Yes. And did it occur to anyone that those might be birthday gifts? Or that you could simply ask before assuming fraud? Mr. Peterson opened his mouth, then closed it. There was really no good answer to that question. A woman in line spoke up. This happened to my grandmother last year at a different bank. They treated her like she was senile just because she wanted to withdraw her own money. It's disgraceful. Other voices joined in. People were sharing their own stories or stories they'd heard. The mood in the bank had shifted completely. This wasn't about a celebrity anymore. This was about something that could happen to anyone's mother, grandmother, or to themselves when they got older. Keanu listened to the voices for a moment, then turned his attention back to Margaret. He walked over and crouched down beside her chair again. Margaret, would you like me to stay while they process your transaction? Or would you prefer to handle it privately? Margaret looked at him with wide eyes. She'd finally recognized who he was, probably from hearing people say his name. You're really Keanu Reeves, she said softly. I've seen your movies. My grandson loves them, he smiled warmly. I hope that's a good thing. You don't have to do this, she said. I don't want to take up your time. You must have important places to be. I'm exactly where I need to be, he said simply. But seriously, would you like some privacy or would you like me to stick around? No pressure either way. Margaret thought about it for a moment. If you don't mind staying, I think I'd feel better having someone with me. Just to make sure they don't try to confuse me again. Then I'm staying, Keanu said. He stood and offered her his arm. Shall we finish this? Margaret took his arm and stood up, steadier now with his support. Together they walked back to the counter. The crowd parted for them like they were royalty. Ashley had composed herself somewhat, though her eyes were still red. Mrs. Henderson, Ashley said, her voice much gentler now. I sincerely apologize for how I treated you earlier. That was wrong of me. I'd like to help you with your transaction now, if that's okay. Margaret nodded. She pulled out her pension check again, handling it carefully. Ashley took it with both hands, treating it with the respect it deserved. This wasn't just a piece of paper. This was Margaret's livelihood, her medicine, her ability to eat that month. While Ashley processed the deposit, Keanu stood beside Margaret at the counter. He noticed how she kept glancing at him like she couldn't quite believe this was happening. He gave her an encouraging smile each time. How much would you like to withdraw? Ashley asked. $200, please, Margaret said quietly. That should cover my prescriptions and groceries for the week. Ashley counted out the money carefully and handed it to Margaret along with a receipt. Your new balance is displayed here. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Margaret shook her head. No, that's everything. Thank you, but Keanu wasn't quite done. He turned to Mr. Peterson, who had been standing nearby, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I'd like to speak with whoever is in charge of this branch, Keanu said. Not to get anyone fired, but because I think there's a bigger issue here that needs addressing. I'm the branch manager, Mr. Peterson said weakly. Then who's your supervisor? That would be the regional director. But Mr. Reeves, I assure you we will take steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. What steps? Keanu asked directly. Because from where I'm standing, this looked like standard practice for how you treat elderly customers. The system flags their accounts for normal activity, and instead of using common sense, you treat them like they're incompetent. That's not just a training issue. That's a culture issue, the crowd murmured in agreement. Someone shouted, He's right. Mr. Peterson was sweating profusely now. I will personally ensure that all staff members receive additional sensitivity training. And I'd like to offer Mrs. Henderson complimentary premium banking services for a year as an apology. Keanu looked at Margaret. What do you think? Is that acceptable to you? Margaret looked surprised to be asked her opinion. I don't need premium services. I just need to be treated like a person. The simplicity of her statement hit everyone in the room. That's all she'd wanted from the beginning. Not special treatment, not premium services, just basic human respect. How about this, Keanu suggested. premium services for Margaret, and a comprehensive review of how this bank handles elderly customers. Training for all staff on treating people with dignity, regardless of their age or account balance, and maybe a protocol where if an account is flagged, someone calls the customer first before assuming fraud. Would that work? Mr. Peterson nodded so vigorously his head looked like it might fall off. Yes, absolutely. All of that. I'll contact the regional office today and make it a priority. Good, Keanu said. He pulled out his phone and held it up. I'm going to take a note of your name and this branch location. I have people who can follow up and make sure these changes actually happen. Is that okay with you, Margaret? Yes, Margaret said, finding her voice stronger now. Because this shouldn't happen to anyone else. Keanu smiled at her. Exactly right, he turned to Ashley. Can I ask you something? She nodded nervously. When you came to work this morning, did you plan on making someone cry? No, Ashley whispered. Of course not. Then remember this feeling right now. Remember how it feels to realize you hurt someone when you didn't mean to. Let that feeling guide you next time you interact with a customer who seems confused or needs extra help. They're not trying to waste your time. They're just trying to live their lives. Ashley nodded, tears flowing again. I will. I promise I will. Keanu looked around the bank at all the people watching. That goes for everyone, really. We're all going to be old someday if we're lucky. We're all going to need help sometimes. We're all going to struggle with new technology or systems that don't make sense to us. How we treat the most vulnerable people says everything about who we are. The silence that followed was profound. People weren't fidgeting or checking their phones anymore. They were actually listening, actually thinking about what he'd said. Then Keanu did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. Margaret, where do you get your prescriptions filled? The pharmacy on 5th Street, she said. Why? And you said they cost about $400 a month. She nodded, looking confused about where this was going. Keanu pulled out several bills and folded them into her hand, closing her fingers around them. This should cover a few months. Please don't argue with me about it. Margaret looked down at her hand, then back up at him with fresh tears. I can't accept this. This is too much. Yes, you can, he said gently. Because you deserve it and because I want to help. Sometimes we all need help and there's no shame in accepting it. Keanu Reeves hadn't planned on going to the bank that day. He'd been filming a scene for his latest movie just 3 blocks away, and during the lunch break, his assistant had reminded him about a check he needed to deposit. Normally, someone on his team would handle these things, but he'd been right there, and the bank was close. He'd thrown on his regular jeans and jacket over his costume and walked over, hoping to slip in and out without anyone noticing. He'd been in line for about 20 minutes when the elderly woman in front started having problems. At first, he wasn't paying much attention. He had his baseball cap pulled low and was just trying to blend in. But something about the teller's voice, that sharp edge of impatience, made him look up. The woman was probably in her late 70s. She wore a light blue blouse and a cardigan that had seen better days, and she was clutching her purse like it held everything precious in the world. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to hand over an envelope. Keanu recognized that tremor. His mother had developed the same shake in her hands during her final years. The teller, a young woman who looked barely out of college, was speaking loud enough for half the bank to hear. Ma'am, elderly clients often fall victim to scams. Keanu felt something tighten in his chest. The way she said elderly made it sound like a disease. Like being older meant you couldn't think for yourself anymore. He watched the old woman's shoulders curve inward, making herself smaller as if she could somehow disappear from everyone's stares. I don't understand, the woman said quietly. I just need to deposit my pension check. The people around Keanu were getting restless. The man directly in front of him muttered under his breath about old people and how they always held up the line. A woman behind him was typing aggressively on her phone, probably complaining to someone about the wait. Nobody seemed to care that a human being was struggling up there. She was just an obstacle between them and their lunch breaks. When the manager showed up, Keanu felt his jaw tighten. The guy didn't even try to take the woman aside privately. He just started interrogating her right there in the middle of the bank lobby, his voice carrying over the sound of clicking keyboards and shuffling papers. Mrs. Henderson, is it? I need you to explain why you've had unusual deposit activity on your account this month. Keanu shifted his position so he could see better. The woman, Mrs. Henderson, apparently looked confused and frightened. Her voice shook when she answered. Unusual? I don't know what you mean. You've made 3 deposits this month instead of your usual one. Oh. Yes, it was my birthday last month. My grandchildren both sent me checks. It was such a simple, innocent explanation. Birthday checks from grandkids. Keanu thought about his own mother. How excited she'd been when she received cards and small gifts. This woman was being treated like a criminal for depositing birthday money from her family. The manager kept firing questions at her like she was under investigation. And do you regularly make withdrawals at ATM machines outside of business hours? Sometimes, yes, if I need cash for the pharmacy and it's after the bank closes. I work the night shift at the grocery store part-time, so sometimes I need cash late. Keanu felt a surge of respect mixed with sadness. This woman was 78 years old and still working night shifts just to make ends meet. And instead of treating her with the dignity she deserved, this bank was making her life harder. At your age, you're still working. The manager's tone was condescending, like he couldn't believe someone her age would still be in the workforce. My pension doesn't cover everything. My medications alone cost nearly $400 a month. $400 for medication. Keanu knew people struggled, but hearing it said out loud by someone who was clearly at the end of her rope hit different. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was a real person who needed her medicine and couldn't even deposit her own check without being humiliated. He watched as the manager demanded more identification, more proof, more documentation. The woman fumbled through her wallet with shaking hands, trying to find what he wanted. When she couldn't produce everything on his list, the manager told her she'd have to come back another day. That's when she started crying. She tried to hide it, wiping quickly at her eyes with the back of her hand, but Keanu saw. Everyone saw, and nobody did anything. The teller went back to her computer. The manager stood there with his arms crossed. The people in line just shifted impatiently, annoyed at the delay. "I'm sorry," the old woman whispered. "I'm so sorry for the trouble." Something inside Keanu snapped. Not violently, but like a decision clicking into place. He'd seen enough. He'd stood there long enough watching someone be treated like they didn't matter. His mother had always taught him that you stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. She'd taught him that kindness costs nothing but means everything. He looked around the bank, really looked at it. All these people with their phones and their schedules. Too busy to care about an old woman who just needed help. The marble floors, the expensive lighting, the corporate logo on the wall. This bank had money. They had resources. But they didn't have compassion. Keanu made his decision. He stepped out of line. The movement caught the attention of a few people nearby. When you're 6 feet tall and wearing a baseball cap indoors, people